For over a century, if you saw an American soldier holding a pistol, a machine gun, or an automatic rifle, chances are you were looking at the mind of one man. He designed weapons so reliable they fired 40,000 rounds without jamming. He built guns so deadly they ended 2 world wars. He was the most prolific firearms inventor in human history, and it all started in a dusty gun shop in the Utah frontier with a 13-year-old boy and a pile of scrap metal. John Moses Browning was not born into privilege. He was the son of a Mormon pioneer, Jonathan Browning, a self-taught gunsmith who had fled religious persecution in Illinois and crossed the Rocky Mountains with Brigham Young. Jonathan was a polygamist, as was common in the Mormon community at the time. He had 3 wives and fathered 22 children. John Moses was born on January 23, 1855, in Ogden, Utah, a remote settlement nestled against the rugged Wasatch Mountains. The town had been founded only 2 years earlier. There were no factories, no universities, no engineering schools, just frontier, faith, and firearms. Jonathan Browning was no ordinary gunsmith. He had invented his own repeating rifle, a curious design with a horizontal magazine that looked like a harmonica. His guns were stamped with the motto, "Holiness to the Lord, our preservation." He was a tinkerer, an innovator, and a dreamer, but he was also a poor businessman who constantly chased new projects instead of finishing old ones. The family was never wealthy. What Jonathan gave his sons was not money. It was knowledge. From the age of 7, John worked in his father's shop. He learned to identify every gun part that came through the door. He memorized the feel of steel, the tension of springs, the geometry of triggers. By 10, he was tagging customer guns for repairs, while his father tinkered with other projects. But John wasn't content to just fix guns. He wanted to build them. 1865. John Moses Browning is 10 years old. He convinces his younger brother Matt to help him build a gun from cast-off parts and scraps he found around the shop. The result was crude. It had no trigger, no hammer. The only way to fire it was to pour gunpowder through a small vent and light it with a burning stick. The 2 boys ran to the edge of their property, aimed at some prairie chickens, and lit the powder. The makeshift gun kicked so hard it knocked John to the ground. But it worked. They brought home 3 birds for supper that night. When their father saw the crude weapon, he didn't praise his son. He looked at the gun, looked at the boy, and said, "John Moses, you're going on 11. Can't you make a better gun than that?" Most children would have been crushed. John Moses Browning was not most children. He took those words as a challenge, and he spent the next 6 decades proving he could make a better gun than anyone had ever seen. 1879. John Moses Browning receives his first patent. He is 24 years old. The design is for a single-shot falling block rifle. It is strong. It is reliable. It is elegant. He and his brothers begin manufacturing the rifle in their small Ogden factory. They call the company Browning Brothers. Within a few years, 600 rifles roll off their modest production line. The guns are good. Word spreads. And then, one day in 1883, a man arrives in Ogden. He works for the Winchester Repeating Arms Company. He has been sent to investigate a competitor. The Winchester representative examines the Browning rifle. He is stunned. The design is superior to anything Winchester is producing. He sends a telegram to New Haven, Connecticut. The message is simple: buy this gun. Winchester offers Browning $8,000 for the patent. In today's money, that's over $200,000. John Moses Browning accepts. It is the beginning of a partnership that will reshape the American West. Most inventors would have been satisfied. They would have taken the money, bought a nice house, and lived comfortably. But John Moses Browning did not think like most inventors. He saw problems everywhere, problems that needed solving, guns that could be made lighter, actions that could be made smoother, mechanisms that could be made simpler. Over the next 2 decades, Browning designs gun after gun for Winchester. The Model 1886 lever-action rifle, the Model 1892, the legendary Model 1894, which would become the best-selling hunting rifle in American history with more than 7 million units produced. The Model 1897 pump-action shotgun, which soldiers would later call the trench gun. Each design was an improvement over the last. Each design pushed the boundaries of what firearms could do. Winchester was getting rich off Browning's genius. But Browning didn't care about wealth. He cared about the work. He cared about the problem. He would walk into his workshop in the morning and not emerge until he had solved whatever puzzle was occupying his mind. His family understood. This was who he was. This was what he was born to do. And soon he would face the biggest problem of his career. 1901. On the other side of the world, American soldiers are dying in the jungles of the Philippines. The enemy is not a foreign army. It is the Moro warriors of Mindanao, Muslim tribesmen who have resisted foreign rule for 400 years. The Moros are unlike any enemy American forces have faced. They wrap their bodies in leather bindings, they work themselves into a religious frenzy, and then they charge, wielding curved swords called bolos and barongs. The standard issue sidearm for American troops is a .38 caliber Colt revolver. It is light, it is accurate, and it is utterly useless. Reports flood back to Washington. Soldiers are firing 6 shots into a charging Moro warrior. The warrior keeps coming. He cuts down the soldier before he can reload. The body of the American is found next to the body of the Moro, who finally bled out with half a dozen bullets in his chest. The .38 caliber round simply does not have the stopping power. The military is desperate. They dig old .45 caliber Colt peacemakers out of storage, relics from the Indian Wars. The heavier bullet works better, but the single-action revolver is slow to reload. It is a stopgap, not a solution. In 1904, the Army conducts the Thompson-Lagarde tests. Officers and medical personnel shoot cattle and human cadavers in the Chicago stockyards, testing different calibers for penetration and what they call stopping effect. The conclusion is unanimous. The minimum acceptable caliber for a military sidearm is .45. Enter John Moses Browning. He has been working on an auto-loading pistol design for years. The concept is revolutionary. Instead of manually cocking a hammer and pulling a trigger, the gun uses the recoil energy from each shot to eject the spent casing and load the next round automatically. It is faster, it is more reliable, and it is mechanically elegant. Browning had already designed a .38 caliber automatic pistol for Colt. Now he scales it up. He creates a new cartridge, the .45 automatic Colt pistol. The bullet weighs 230 grains. It travels at 850 feet per second. It hits like a sledgehammer, but designing the gun is only half the battle. He has to prove it works. 1910. The United States Army holds pistol trials at Springfield Armory. 2 guns make it to the final round. One is a Savage, the other is a Colt, designed by John Moses Browning. The test is brutal. 6,000 rounds are to be fired through each pistol over 2 days. If the gun overheats, the operator is allowed to dunk it in a bucket of water to cool it. The Savage pistol malfunctions 37 times. The Colt pistol, the Browning design, malfunctions 0 times. 0. John Moses Browning personally supervises the test. He watches as his creation devours 6,000 rounds without a single jam. When the gun grows too hot to hold, they plunge it into water and keep firing. The steel hisses. steam rises, and the gun keeps working. On March 29, 1911, the United States Army officially adopts the pistol. They call it the Model of 1911, the M1911. It will become the most iconic handgun in American history. It will serve as the standard-issue sidearm for over 70 years. American soldiers will carry it through 2 world wars, Korea, Vietnam, and beyond. Marines will carry it through the jungles of Guadalcanal. Paratroopers will jump into Normandy with it strapped to their hips. Tunnel rats will crawl through the Ku Chai tunnels with it in their hands. The design was so perfect, so elegantly engineered, that it remained essentially unchanged for decades. Minor improvements were made in 1924, resulting in the M1911A1 designation. But the core design, the genius of John Moses Browning, remained intact. When the military finally retired the M1911 in 1985, replacing it with the Beretta M9, soldiers mourned. Many special operations units refused to give it up. Some still carry it today. But John Moses Browning was not finished. He was just getting started. 1917. America enters the Great War. The Western Front has become a slaughterhouse. Machine guns and barbed wire have turned the battlefield into a meat grinder. The American expeditionary forces arrive with enthusiasm, but they arrive with almost no modern automatic weapons. The Army's machine gun inventory is pitiful. A few hundred obsolete designs, French shots that jam in the mud. There is no doctrine. There is no training. There is only desperation. John Moses Browning has been working on 2 weapons in secret. One is a shoulder-fired automatic rifle. The other is a water-cooled heavy machine gun. He brings both to Washington. February 27, 1917. Congress Heights, just outside the Capitol. 300 people gather. Congressmen, senators, military brass, foreign dignitaries, reporters. They have come to see a demonstration. Browning sets up his water-cooled machine gun. He loads a belt of .30-06 ammunition, and he begins to fire. The gun roars. Brass casings fly. The crowd watches in astonishment. When the demonstration ends, Browning is immediately awarded a contract, but the military brass want more testing. They want to see just how far this gun can be pushed. May 1917. Springfield Armory, the official endurance trial. The Army asks Browning to fire 20,000 rounds through a single gun. 20,000 rounds is an enormous number. Barrels warp, springs break, actions seize. No machine gun in the world has ever passed such a test. John Moses Browning loads the first belt. He fires 20,000 rounds. Not a single malfunction, not a single broken part. The Army officers are satisfied. They prepare to recommend immediate adoption. Browning looks at them. He is not satisfied. He loads another belt, and he fires another 20,000 rounds. 40,000 rounds total, from a single gun, with only one minor component failure at the very end. The board is speechless. They have never seen anything like it. They recommend immediate adoption of what will become the M1917 Browning machine gun. But Browning has brought 2 weapons. The second is the Browning automatic rifle, the BAR. It is designed to be carried by a single soldier. It fires from the shoulder or the hip. It gives every rifleman the firepower of a machine gun team. The BAR is demonstrated that same day. The crowd erupts. Both weapons are adopted within months. Browning's son, Val, personally demonstrates the guns to American troops in France. The first recorded combat use of the BAR comes on September 12, 1918, during the Meuse-Argonne offensive. It is an immediate success. French commanders beg for 15,000 units. The war ends before they can be delivered, but the legend is born. By the end of 1918, General John J. Pershing, commander of the American Expeditionary Forces, comes to Browning with a new request. The Germans have armored aircraft. They have tanks. The 30 caliber machine gun is not enough. Pershing wants a weapon with a caliber of at least half an inch, with a muzzle velocity of at least 2,700 feet per second. John Moses Browning goes back to work. He scales up his machine gun design. He creates a new cartridge, the 50 caliber Browning machine gun round, or 50 BMG. The bullet weighs nearly 2 ounces. It can penetrate an inch of armor plate at 250 yards. It is devastating. The prototype is tested on October 15, 1918. It works. But the war ends before the weapon can see combat. Browning continues refining the design throughout the 1920s. The result is the M2 heavy machine gun. Soldiers will call it Ma Deuce. The M2 will become the longest-serving weapon in American military history. It will be mounted on tanks, trucks, aircraft, and ships. It will see combat in every American conflict from World War II to Afghanistan. It will still be in frontline service more than a century after its invention. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, it was Browning machine guns that fired back. Chief Petty Officer John Finn manned a 50 caliber Browning during the attack, exposing himself to enemy fire for over 2 hours while shooting down enemy aircraft. He was awarded the Medal of Honor. When American P-51 Mustangs swept the skies over Europe, they were armed with 6 50 caliber Browning machine guns. When B-17 Flying Fortresses flew daylight bombing raids over Germany, they bristled with 13 Browning guns in defensive positions. The bomber crews called the 50 caliber their lifeline. It was the difference between making it home and becoming a fireball over the Reich. By the end of World War II, American factories had produced nearly 2 million M2 machine guns. The weapon earned a nickname from the soldiers who depended on it. They called it Medusa. They trusted it with their lives, and it never let them down. Do you know how many weapons John Moses Browning designed that are still in use today? The M1911 pistol, the BAR, the M2 machine gun, the M1917 and M1919 machine guns, the Auto 5 shotgun. These are not antiques. They are not relics. They are still being manufactured. They are still being carried into combat. They are still saving lives. One man, 128 patents. A legacy that outlived him by a century. In 1902, Browning had a falling out with Winchester over royalties. He took his newest design, a revolutionary semi-automatic shotgun, to Remington. The president of Remington agreed to meet with him, but minutes before the meeting, the president died of a heart attack. Browning took the design to Belgium, to Fabrique Nationale de Herstal. They embraced him. They manufactured his shotgun, the Auto 5, which would remain in production until 1998. Browning made the journey to Belgium 61 times over the next 2 decades, working with their engineers, refining his designs. He never retired. He never slowed down. On November 26, 1926, John Moses Browning was at his workbench in the Fabrique Nationale factory in Liège, Belgium. He was 71 years old. He was tinkering with a new pistol design. His son, Val, was working beside him. John complained of chest pains. He grew lightheaded. He lay down on a couch in Val's office. "Son," he said quietly, "I wouldn't be surprised if I am dying." Minutes later, John Moses Browning passed away. He died exactly as he had lived, at a workbench, surrounded by steel and springs and the unfinished blueprints of his next invention. The pistol he was working on when he died would be completed 9 years later by a Belgian engineer named Dieudonné Sève. It would become the Browning High Power, one of the most successful military pistols ever made. More than 10 million would be produced. John Moses Browning's body was returned to the United States. He was buried with full military honors. The weapons he designed had helped America win the First World War. They would go on to help win the Second. Today, if you visit the Smithsonian, you can see Browning's designs behind glass. If you visit the Browning Firearms Museum in Ogden, Utah, you can stand in the same town where a 13-year-old boy built his first gun from scraps and knocked himself to the ground firing it. His father told him he could do better. He spent his entire life proving it. John Moses Browning did not just design guns. He designed the future of warfare. He armed democracy. And he did it in a frontier workshop with hand tools, intuition, and the relentless belief that anything could be made better. Be quick. Be reliable. Never jam. Those were not just engineering principles. They were a way of life.